Hey Adventures, so this is the final installment of my top 100 books of all time. This is numbers 10 through 1. Some of these books will not be surprising to anybody, maybe some of them might be surprising to some people. If that's the case, that's great. If not, that's fine too. Thank you to all of you who have been following along on this journey, because this has been a fun series to do, and hopefully in the future I will be able to do another one. I'll probably, if I do another one in the future, limit it to only fantasy, because then I can just have the fantasy books on this list, because I should have more than enough fantasy books to fill out this list entirely. But let's get into numbers 10 through 1. At number 10, I have Dune by Frank Herbert. This is one that I have read twice, and both times I've had basically the exact same experience of, oh my goodness, this is so good, I love this book. And I think so much about what makes me love this book is the exploration of cultures, the exploration of this new world, of the world building and all that kind of stuff, but it's primarily the exploration of cultures and of wars and the politics of this world and of this universe, I guess, more galaxy universe, I think is probably the best term. But kind of all of that stuff is what makes me love this book. It's not that the story itself is particularly my favorite. It's not that the characters are particularly my favorite or anything like that. It's kind of a mixture of primarily the cultural exploration, the world building, and the politicking that makes me love this book. And I actually am surprised to see it at place number 10. I probably would have placed it somewhere in the 20s until I had written out this list and realized, probably belongs higher than that because I like it more than some of these other books and I like it less than these ones and stuff like that. So that's where it ends up, is at number 10. I'm not mad about that by any means, but it is a little bit surprising to me that Dune is as high as it is. At number 9, I have The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. This is the first book in the D'Artagnan romances. It's so much fun. The characters that we're exploring, especially the Three Musketeers, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis, are so good. Those characters are so interesting. They're so much fun to play around with, and just the banter that they have, the relationship that they have with each other, it just gets better and better as the book goes by and as the series goes by, and just fantastic, utterly fantastic story. I have my issues with it, for sure. I do have my issues with this book, but the story, the adventure, in the original meaning of the word, the romance of this series, I love. And it's very fun book, very fun series to read. Yeah, like everybody knows this story, or at least they think they know the story, because there's been adaptations galore for this series, and well deserved, because it's wonderful, it's fantastic. But every single one of those adaptations, while I can understand why they adapt them the way they do, and I can understand those decisions that people are making in the adaptation, they're missing so much. There's so much more in the actual book here than there is in any of the adaptations. It's big. It's not as big as some of Dumas' other books, even some of Dumas' other books in this series, but the book itself is way too big to fit into a 2-hour movie, even a 3-hour movie, and to really get everything that is in this book accurately into a movie. It just wouldn't work. But it is fantastic. The adaptations, I have so much fun with these adaptations. This is another one of those series that, or worlds, or whatever you want to call it, like King Arthur or like Robin Hood, more akin to Robin Hood, that every time I see an adaptation, I just enjoy it because it's fun, even though sometimes they're really bad. But I do really like The Three Musketeers. And I have a review of it, so that's great if you want to go watch that. Number 8 is my favorite of the Redwall series, and I love that it is up this high, and that is Mame by Brian Jacques. This is actually the direct sequel to Redwall, and it is, in my opinion, other than the 2 books that I haven't read and the 2 that I don't remember anything about, this is the best book in the Redwall series, in my opinion. I would have to go read those other 4 to really know if that opinion still holds, but this is so good. It is a very different story. It's very different from Redwall. You have some of the same characters. You have Matthias, who is the main character of Redwall, again returning here, and very important character for sure. But it's no longer his story. This is Madameo's story, and it is about slavery. It is about these animals being taken into slavery and forced to serve somebody who they don't want to. But that's a part of the story. That's part of what makes me love the story. But the other part is the world building. We get to explore so much more of the world. Of course, Redwall starts us out and we hear about so many of these other things. We hear about Solomon Dastron, we hear about Lomehedge, we hear about Martin the Warrior and these grand tales of the past and all these things. But it's not until Mame, well, there's other books, because Mame was not the first book in the series that was written, or the second book in the series that was written, I mean. But it is, if you only read Redwall and then you immediately after go into Mame, you'll get to explore things that you have never gotten to explore previously, because that's just not the story of Redwall. So it expands upon the world, as most of the other books in the Redwall series do. It expands upon the world, but I feel like this is just the best told, one of the best stories itself, but also the best told of the stories in the Redwall series. Fantastic, brilliant, love this book. Number 7 is The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is I don't know if this is truly my favorite Sanderson book, or if this is truly my favorite book of the Mistborn series, but it's the book that I have placed at number 1, because I really do love this series. The Mistborn era one is fantastic. This one, this was my introduction to Sanderson. This is the first Sanderson book that I read, and the thing that caught my attention with this book is the blurb on the back, or at least the first half of the blurb, and I can't remember exactly how it goes. I am going to pretend like I do, and I'm going to try and quote it from memory, but it's something along the lines of, "Once a hero rose to save the world. A young man with a mysterious heritage courageously challenged the darkness that strangled the land. He failed," or something like that. And just that, this is epic, this is going to be a great story. He failed. And now we're starting over, and now we're in a different place. That idea has always, to me, that is what caught my attention. That is what brought this book to my mind. And when I first read it, I just sank into the world. It was kind of the first fantasy outside of Lord of the Rings and Narnia that I had really read much of, and Guardians of the Galaxy. And so it was something new, something entirely different, and just, it worked perfectly for me. It perfectly fit my tastes. It's the magic is super cool. The characters I found super engaging. Just the world itself, the ash fell from the sky, everything about the world. I just really loved this world in this book as well. And so it definitely holds a special place in my heart because of what it did for me as a reader, and because of its introduction to me, because it introduced me to Sanderson and all that kind of stuff. And I do think it belongs for sure up in my top 10. Whether or not it is truly my favorite book, I don't know. Favorite Sanderson Cosmere book, I don't know. Number 6 is The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. This is a nonfiction book about the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, known as the World's Columbia Expo. And this is a nonfiction, but it is also a novel. We are able to tell a complete story, or have a narrative being told through this nonfiction book. And just the combination of the story of the White City, of the World's Fair, as well as that of this serial killer, this very, very bad dude, and the combination of those two stories and how they played off of each other, and how they worked, and how the serial killer used the World's Fair as a means to an end for him. It's so interesting, fascinating, and the fact that it's history makes it just so much more interesting to me, and the fact that it's America, and you see the mindset of America, of Americans, shine through in this book, in this story, in this creation of this World's Fair. I have a review of this because I love this book, and also because I read the book, but also go watch the review, because that clearly, much more clearly at least than this, articulates my thoughts on this book. Number 5 is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. This is the first Bradbury that I read, and of the 3 that I've read so far, it is definitely my favorite. The thing that drew me to this book or that drew me into this book, I should say, is the writing style, is the atmospheric nature of the story. It's just, you sink into this story, and it's creepy, but it's a creepy story, but it's also really cool, and the story of the two boys and how their relationship, and their relationship with their father, the one boy's relationship with the father, and his best friend's relationship with his friend's father, how that all works and how that ties together into the story, and how it allows the story to happen. I have a few minor endings with the execution of the finale, but with that being said, even with those few minor issues, the story itself was still enough to capture my imagination and immerse me in the world and in the story in a way that not a ton of other books do. I say this a lot, but this one specifically, the writing style drew me into the book and made me visualize what was actually going on. And that's also the carnival aesthetic of it really helps make me love the book as well, because I find carnival super creepy, but also they're a super cool setting for storytelling, and just the way that the carnival works here, and the characters in the carnival, and the fact that the carnival itself and the merry-go-round is a character of its own, and just all the ways that ties into this story. Love this story. Again, I have a review of this. Go watch my review, because again, I articulate my thoughts better there. Number 4 then is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This is not my favorite translation. My favorite translation is actually the Tolkien translation. I haven't read too many others. There's this Winnie translation, and I think I've read one more, but I can't remember. But whatever the case, this book, this story is one of my favorite stories of all time. This story of Gawain and his journey through the story, and the writing of it. Of course, it's written in verse. It's a very alliterative storytelling style, and form of poetry, and just I love the book. I love the story. I love the adventure that he goes on. I love him meeting the Green Knight. At first the challenge at the very beginning, where he strikes off the head of the Green Knight, and then the Green Knight picks up the head, issues his challenge, and leaves. And then Gawain is dreading it, and then he eventually, because he's a knight of Camelot, he takes up this mantle and goes and seeks out the Green Knight again for the completion of this game that he took upon himself to play. But then his adventure as he's going there, and I don't know, I don't want to ramble about these books for as long as I have been, so again, I'm going to recommend you go watch my review of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, because I love this book. The Tolkien translation, let me briefly mention about that. This Winnie translation is very good, clean, very easy to read translation of the story, but the Tolkien translation, Tolkien's writing style, serves the story very, very well. It feels like that story was written to be translated by Tolkien, because Tolkien takes the story and he keeps the alliteration. Sure, he keeps a lot of the meter and the verse of what is going on, even though there's not a ton of rhyme to it. He keeps the meter and the rhythm in a way so that you can still read it, but he also keeps the alliteration so that or tries to keep the alliteration as much as he can. But also just his writing style lends itself to the story so well. And because of that, that's why the Tolkien translation is my favorite that I've read. Nothing against the Winnie translation, and I actually think the Winnie translation, if you're not a fan of Tolkien, maybe try the Winnie translation or one of the many, many other translations that are out there, because it is very much Tolkien's writing style, and it feels like something that Tolkien wrote, except that he just translated it. But his style definitely goes into the translation of that story. Number 3 is a book that I don't have an unabridged edition of. Eventually I will get an unabridged edition of this book for my library, because, well, it's not yet a library, for my personal book collection, because I want an edition of this book because I love it, and that is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. So now we have 2 Dumas on this series, or on this top 10. We have 2 Dumas here. The Three Musketeers being the first one, and then The Count of Monte Cristo being the other one, and by far my favorite of the Dumas books that I have read, although there's things about the D'Artagnan romances that I enjoy more than The Count of Monte Cristo. The Count of Monte Cristo is a revenge tale. If you didn't know that, that's what this story is about. It's about Edmond Dantes seeking revenge, and it's brilliant. It's so smart, it's so witty, it's engaging. It's just a fun book to read. It is hard to, you do struggle with it because it's so big, and because Dumas is a classic, well, he's a French author. The book's translated from French into English, but the translations are really good. The audiobooks, there's an audiobook, the one that I listened to was narrated by Bill Homewood, I believe his name is. There's also one, I'm sure, by Simon Vance, because Vance did all of the D'Artagnan romance ones, and he does great with those, but I really like the Bill Homewood narration. But the Count of Monte Cristo, it's just a fantastic story. I don't know if I have a review of this book. I probably need to reread it so that I can review it for the channel, but I know I've talked about it plenty of other times in other places, so I recommend seeking out some of my other thoughts and comments about this book, because I really love The Count of Monte Cristo. I feel like my thoughts are just not flowing in the same way with this top 10 as they have with the other books in the series, and that's alright. Moving on to my numbers 2 and 1. If you don't know what these are, and you haven't guessed them by now, maybe go watch some of my other videos because I talk about these two books a lot. Probably to no one's surprise, at number 2 I have The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and at number 1 I have The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. These are ones that I tend to flip-flop back and forth on which one is number 1 and which one is number 2. At the moment, The Hobbit is number 2 for me. And this was even before my reread of The Lord of the Rings that I just did in January. I read The Hobbit in December, and then I wrote this list and I did my reread of The Lord of the Rings, and it stayed the same. At the moment, the adult, the grown-upness, I guess, I don't know what you want to call it, the more heavier theming and storytelling that it goes on in The Lord of the Rings is more appealing to me than what is in The Hobbit. As much as I love The Hobbit, The Hobbit usually is actually what I place in my number 1 spot between the two. The Hobbit at the moment isn't. I was craving more of that adult fantasy rather than the children's story that is The Hobbit. Both are great, both are fantastic. I love and reread both of these every year, and so I'm not complaining, not saying that either one is bad. Just that The Hobbit, at this specific point in time, The Hobbit, because of the writing style, because it's more for a younger audience, or written with a younger audience in mind, isn't as appealing to me at the moment as Lord of the Rings was. So that's kind of why Lord of the Rings is number 1 and The Hobbit is number 2, but both of them basically number 1 every single time. They deserve to be up here. They always are, they always will be. Oh, maybe not always, but until I can find something that can dethrone either of these books, they're going to stay up here for until that point, which I don't know when that will be, if ever. Yes, love these books. I've talked about them extensively on the channel. Go find some of my other videos if you want to know some of my thoughts. I've done reviews for both of them. I have recently, with my reread of The Lord of the Rings for 2023, I did a vlog about my experience with it because I approached it slightly differently, and I approached it by only reading the parts that are from Frodo's perspective, or that Frodo is awake and alert and understanding for. Nothing else I paid attention to. I skipped it, except for the occasional mistakes that I made in just reading through, because I was reading the book and I didn't think about that I was skipping sections. And so there was the two that I specifically remember, the one being when Gollum is having a conversation with himself, and then the one where Sam goes and talks to the Cottons. Those are the two specific moments that I remember being like, oh wait, I'm not supposed to be reading those because Frodo's not around for those. But other than that, that is the completion, numbers 10 through 1, of my top 100 books of all time. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite adventure and for following along this journey. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.